It's a crucial discussion this morning. We have, I would say, the head of the case. So, in the studio, after a long week of back and forth in Parliament, the country's Attorney General and Minister of Justice, Alpha Sesay Esquire, is here to talk about the amendment of the 1991 Constitution. What's new and how would this review help the country's democratic process? Good morning, Mr. AJ.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for the honor of being here and the honor of discussing this very important subject with the people of Sierra Leone.
And also we want to wish you a happy birthday from the management and staff of the Africa Young Voices Media Empire.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here on my birthday doing what I like to call the people's work.
Indeed.
Absolutely.
Indeed. So let's start discussing. I mean, I always ask this question. What are your fair assessment, first of all, about the current, amendment process of the 1991 Constitution? I know you are the head of the entire process. So, I mean, listening to you this morning would perhaps breathe some reprieve or, ease in the entire tension that we are observing in the moment, not least in Parliament. But people have been discussing this. I know from the political lines, from the cookery shop to Abacha Street to PZ, everyone has a take about what is happening at the moment. What do you think is happening and how would you describe the process?
Well, I think what is happening is that as a country and leadership being provided by government, we are taking crucial steps to strengthen our democratic architecture.
Okay.
We are taking crucial steps to strengthen our governance framework. We are taking crucial steps to make our constitution people-centered. Now, of course, we acknowledge as government that people have different views about this. No surprises. And that is why, we like to say we were deliberate in sending the bill electronically to the public. We all know that the practice for bills in this country by law is to publish in the Gazette. And once published in the Gazette, citizens can go to the government bookshop and get copies, and use that process to inform themselves about what is in the bill. But of course, that is in addition to public discussions that we are obliged to hold on important pieces of legislation like this. But this time around, in addition to what we put out in the Gazette, we also took the unprecedented step of releasing this to the public. So in a way, we deprived the government bookshop of money. But it's good because, this is really for the people. This is about the people, and it's a process that should be owned by them. Of course, since we did this, it has generated a lot of discussions, which is exactly what we wanted, because a reform process like this deserves to be discussed, by members of the public. So yes, we like to say that we have had several public consultations across the country. We have had discussions with several interest groups, political parties, civil society, elections management bodies, etc., the media, and I have been in these discussions myself, both in Freetown and in the provinces. But we still thought, would be good to have broader public discussions and obtain feedback, which should really inform this process. Now, I think what has happened, which we acknowledge, is that the process itself, which is really progressive, and I'm happy to break down the details of it, has become a victim of the trust deficit that exists in our country. We acknowledge that, yes, we exist, we operate in a low trust environment. Whether it's APC or SLPP, sometimes people don't trust government. And that's on us to continue to do this work, to make sure that these systems work for people. And I think, whether it's in healthcare or in energy or the justice system or in education, I think, the investments we make. You know, we have to be persistent, because when they work, people get to trust the process over time. So I think we'll get there. But yes, at this point, this is the climate in which we operate. And really, progressive processes like these become victims. Of course, we also acknowledge that sometimes people use processes like this for political gains. And that's okay, because we also operate in a political climate. But it is on us to make sure that we stay focused on doing the right thing. And I think that is what we are doing with this constitutional review process. Now, I'd like to note that this process is not new. Here on AYV, on other platforms where I have had the opportunity to speak about this, I have explained the history, that this goes back more than 20 years. Goes back to the Leone Peace Agreement in 1999. Yes, we had just started implementing the 1991 Constitution, and when war broke out in this country. But at the end of the Civil War, in 2002, well, when we signed the agreement, let me say, in 1999, and the war ended in 2002, we acknowledged that the Constitution as framed was not sufficient to prevent a backsliding. And that is why we made a commitment in the Leone Peace Agreement that we will review this Constitution. And then, of course, you know, that became a subject of discussions during the work of the country's Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which in 2004 recommended that we undertake broad consultations and revise our Constitution. You know, get a Constitution that reflects the views and aspirations of the people of this country for a peaceful and democratic society. And then, of course, you know, we had the Peter Tucker Constitutional Review Committee. We had the Justice Edmund Cowan Constitutional Review Committee. We had the 2017 White Paper. We had a 2021 White Paper. And, you know, when you consider the length of time, the Cowan Committee especially operated from 2013 to 2017. And so when people say that President Bio's government wants to change this constitution just for the sake of it, we say let's go back to the history and really get to understand the journey that we have walked. And I say again boldly that here with me I have the bill. Yes, this bill is informed by the recommendations made by the Justice Edmund Cowan Constitutional Review Committee that operated from 2013 to 2017, 80 members, people from all spheres of life, participated in that process. Political parties, civil society, various interest groups, more than 10,000 public consultations, over 150 position papers, about 80 expert engagements on key constitutional issues, about 40,960 website visits, over 20,000 hours of airtime. You know, so that's what has informed this process. And then, after the 2023 elections, we got into the agreement, we signed the agreement for national unity with our brothers and sisters in the opposition APC. And Resolution 3 provided for the constitution of what became known as the Tripartite Committee, the Cross-Party Committee for Electoral Systems Reform. That committee made several recommendations as well. A lot of them touched on the Constitution, the required constitutional amendments. So what government did was to get those recommendations included in the broader Constitutional Review Committee. Now take note that government had already made a commitment to take the Cowan-led Constitutional Review process to completion. So we were already working on that when the tripartite recommendations came. So what government did was to merge these two and say, let's have these two processes become one. But then, of course, the tripartite recommendations are time sensitive. We also note that elections themselves are time sensitive. If you have to undertake major electoral reforms, you want to do so in sufficient time before elections, because once you do them close to elections, they become more politicized than we have now. So we agreed with our brothers and sisters in the opposition APC, and then of course we explained to our civil society partners and with our development partners, everyone was on the same page that we need to get the electoral reform proposals in now. So we agreed, or we decided that we will phase the process. I don't even want to say separate the process. That now we'll get the electoral reforms through to Parliament, and then once these amendments get into the Constitution, we will continue with the broader constitutional reform process, which will strengthen the human rights provisions in the Constitution, which will strengthen the provisions on the judiciary, or strengthen separation of powers, which will introduce new chapters, including one on citizenship, also reduce executive power, get more power, powers down to local councils. So having a new standalone chapter on decentralization, on local governance, a new standalone chapter on land governance in this country, natural resources, national security, public service. So with all of this, and this amendment, we really believe that the nature and character of the 1991 Constitution will have changed so much that we will call this a new and improved Constitution, which, at the end of the day, will lead us into a referendum for the people to have their say.
But AG, you already have these electoral reforms that are causing a whole lot of problem and concerns from be it political parties, other civil society organizations, and the like. And you mentioned that this draft amendment bill we have now is a mixture of the Cowan recommendations in 2013 and the tripartite recommendations that we have now. Isn't that the problem? That we are relying on something that was done over 12, 13 years ago, and with recent happenings that happen around 2023 elections, isn't that the problem why there are so many concerns around especially the electoral reforms now that you're taking to Parliament?
Well, the point is that, so first, let's go to the process that you referenced, say, over 20 years ago. When those recommendations were made by the Cowan Committee, they were not made to serve a purpose for the next 5 years. Those are recommendations that were made to outlive you and I. Because when you say that you want to strengthen human rights provisions in the Constitution, you don't look at human rights that will apply for the next 5 years. Of course, there will be reforms along the way. For example, when we did the 1991 Constitution, in Section 16, we still made it possible, with Section 16 guarantees the right to life, we still made it possible for persons to be subjected to executions if they were convicted of certain criminal offenses. But of course, at that time, we had not abolished the death penalty. We have since abolished the death penalty. So now, of course, that provision needs to be reviewed. When we also developed the 1991 Constitution, it was really on the back of our transition from a one-party state. So that one-party system also informed the kind of Constitution that we designed. This is in no way meant to say the 1991 Constitution is not a good book. I think it has carried us for 35 years. But then we've seen how certain provisions have been made open to different kinds of interpretation. That is okay. It is a law. We have seen how executive authority has been utilized in this country. We have seen how new trends in our governance architecture have been absent in the 1991 Constitution. I just mentioned local government, right, or decentralization. So when the Cowan Committee made all of these recommendations, it was really to really look into the future, something that will carry us for many years ahead. Of course, this will be reviewed or revised by generations, after us. But then, of course, when the tripartite recommendations came in, they came in at a time when, as I mentioned, the Cowan Committee had also made recommendations that will strengthen our electoral architecture. So, for example, the Cowan Committee recommended, after all of those consultations, that this country should transition to a proportional representation system permanently, right? That's a recommendation in the Cowan report. It also recommended that this country should have fixed dates for elections, because leaving it to the discretion of the president after every 5 years, it was risky. We've had a situation wherein a president has had to think of that date, and that has taken us into 1 year beyond the 10-year term. Remember the life of the last government when we went on for 11 years without extension of the life of government as required by the Constitution. So the Cowan Committee recommended that we have a fixed date for elections. So there are several recommendations. On the Tripartite Committee, I served on the Tripartite Committee for 6 months. As we made these recommendations, as we were preparing to write the report, we looked at the Cowan report, we looked at the white paper, and really tried to make an assessment of how the recommendations made by Cowan were speaking to our own thought process. And when we actually realized that in a lot of ways, there were alignments. And so we went on and made these recommendations in the report. So what we did was to take Cowan and tripartite recommendations, put them together. The point is that they are not contradictory. A lot of the recommendations speak to each other. They align. Some recommendations made by Cowan are not in the tripartite committee's report. For example, I just spoke about the PR system. Yes, the tripartite committee made a separate recommendation that we hold a national dialogue on a preferred electoral system. There were also some recommendations made by the tripartite committee, which were not in the Cowan report. For example, the proposal that if someone running for the presidency is a subject of criminal proceedings to which the state is a party, those proceedings should be suspended 1 year before the elections. And then, of course, they will only resume after the election. So if the person loses, then the trials will resume. The trial will resume. If the person wins, of course, the Constitution makes clear that while someone serves as president, no criminal or civil proceedings, can be brought against them. So the point is that I think one of the things that has affected this process is that the parties did not do internal outreach. I know that when my older brother and I like to say senior comrade and my predecessor in this position was here yesterday, he made reference to that particular provision and said it should not even be in the Constitution. But then if discussions are happening internally, he will know that is a provision, that is a proposal that the APC fought for in the tripartite report. I know that in other spaces I've had to say that I really don't like to say who proposed this or that because I believe in collective responsibility for the tripartite report. But then if a senior legal advisor now says that shouldn't be in the Constitution, then maybe the APC team was not consulting with their own legal advisors on this, because this is a proposal that the APC fought for. That is why it's there. It's not there because government wants to put it there. I think what has affected this process is that people who have been part of the process itself have refused to own it. To own it. And that is not good.
They are alleging changes or updates to what they agreed. Is that the case?
I'll go through that. I'm happy to talk about that. When people say that changes have occurred, yes, I was the first to go public, and I did so last year. In September last year, when I made a presentation on what will go into the bill, I made clear that yes, government has tweaked a few things, and I made clear what those few things were. People heard. I actually even shared the presentation with colleagues, including folks, our brothers and sisters in the APC. So I don't know whether people read at the time, or maybe people did not read at the time. Probably, they've only noticed certain things now. But I spoke about these things. For example, people say we have made changes to the proposal on the selection committee. It's called selection committee, right? Such a nomination committee. Now people say that we have designed it in a way that the president will be the one nominating from the various groups, right? They said that's a deviation from the tripartite report. As we lawyers like to say, with your leave, I'm going to read verbatim what recommendation 36 in the tripartite report says, because people have painted this thing as though the recommendation reads one way, and I, as Attorney General, as Attorney General, I have modified it and given it a different meaning. In the bill, we say the president shall, where there is a vacancy in the office of the Chief Electoral Commissioner or member of the Electoral Commission, appoint such a nomination committee. The president appoints such a nomination committee. It doesn't in any way say the president will nominate. The committee will be appointed by the president, because even when groups nominate members to boards or committees, it is the president who makes the appointment. So the president will appoint such a nomination committee for the purposes of nominating the Chief Electoral Commissioner or a member of the Electoral Commission, comprising one person from the interreligious community, one legal practitioner, person qualified to hold office as judge, etc. So that's what is in the bill. Now, what recommendation 36 says? It says section 32, subsection 3 of the Constitution, to provide for such a nominating committee for the appointment of all members of the Electoral Commission and the chair of the Political Parties Regulation Commission, that comprises 9 persons from all walks of life, with an overall number of women in line with the GIWI Act, including 1 from each of the Interreligious Council, the Bar Association, Civil Society, Labour Congress, Sierra Leone Association of Journalists, women's organizations, youth groups. So that's what the recommendation 36 says. It doesn't in any way talk about who nominates. It says comprising 9 persons from all walks of life. Now, if you will bear me a little bit, because this is one of the things that has, really generated controversy. What we do when we get to the technical aspect of this is to draft. And when we draft, we are also guided by other pieces of legislation, right? So I have with me here several pieces of legislation in this country which make provision for committees or boards with representation from these groups. If you go to the Human Rights Commission of Sierra Leone Act, Section 3 says the President, through the Attorney General, Minister of Justice, shall invite nominations for the public, that's for the candidates to be appointed commissioners. But then the list of nominees shall go through a selection panel comprising 1 representative from government and each of the following umbrella organizations. It doesn't say who nominates, right? From Interreligious Council, National Forum for Human Rights, it lists organizations. But it doesn't say who nominates. But we have never interpreted this provision to mean that the president will determine who is nominated from these groups. We have always consistently interpreted this provision to mean that these persons will send their representatives, right? And then you go to the Local Content Agency Act. It talks about the board. It says the board shall consist of a chairman appointed under subsection 3 and the following members: permanent secretary, financial secretary, and then it says a representative of the National Minerals Agency, Petroleum Directorate, Youth Commission, Sierra Leone Content Consultative Forum, Investment Promotion, then National Tourist Board, the Sierra Leone Chamber of Commerce. It says a representative, right? The Sierra Leone Bar Association, Institute of Engineers. From these bodies, these groups have always made their nominations. We have never interpreted this provision, even though it doesn't say expressly that these groups will send in their nominations. We've never interpreted it to mean that the president will be selecting from these groups. We've always interpreted it to mean when the time comes, these groups will send their representatives, right? And then, Independent Commission for Peace and National Cohesion. The board shall consist of the following members, including chairman and 8 other members, of whom at least 3 shall be women. And then member representing Eastern Region, they said 3 members representing interest groups, right? And all. You come to the Anti-Corruption Act, the Anti-Corruption Commission Act. Again, talks about the Advisory Board on Corruption, right? So shall be appointed from among persons representing civil society, professional bodies, religious organizations, educational institutions, etc. Now, there is one legislation, which is a good example, right? Which, yes, among all of these, yes, we can look at this. But when you look at the majority of our laws, that's how they read. However, for the Independent Media Commission Act, it talks about following members, right? 2 legal practitioners, and it says nominated by the Sierra Leone Bar Association. 2 experts in the field of electronic journalism, nominated by the Sierra Leone Association of Journalists. This is good practice, right? Mm-hmm. So maybe let's have a conversation that maybe the Independent Media Commission Act should be our standard for all of these laws that we put together. But when you look at the majority of the laws that I've read out to you, to now say people are being dishonest by saying that the president will appoint such a nomination committee without saying, just as we have in these other laws, that he will nominate from these groups, I think, that is a bit, I would say, misleading or yes, sometimes, over enthusiasm. Now, there's an aspect of this that we changed, right? Instead of interreligious council, we said interreligious community. Instead of bar association, we said legal practitioner qualified to become judge. We have that in other pieces of legislation as well. And then, but the point is that people point to specificity in these groups, interreligious council, the bar association. Well, people ignore the fact that here it says civil society, but it doesn't say which civil society, right? It says Labour Congress, of course. It says Sierra Leone Association of Journalists, another one that we changed to media practitioner, because look, there are media practitioners who will do well here who are not members of SLAJ, right? It says women's organizations. It doesn't say which of the women's organizations. It says youth groups. It doesn't say which of the youth groups. So even if we list all of these and go by the tripartite recommendation, stricto sensu,
there will be problems along the line.
There will still be groups that will be mentioned here, which are not specific. And so we wanted uniformity, right? And so we said, instead of interreligious council, we say interreligious community. But you can't get a representation from the interreligious community without going to the interreligious council, right? And then other things. But here's another reason why we try to avoid the risk of naming specific groups. The Human Rights Commission Act, 2004. It lists certain groups, right? It says Interreligious Council, National Forum for Human Rights. In 2004, the leading human rights organization in this country was National Forum for Human Rights. Would you say the same thing today? No. No one even knows whether National Forum for Human Rights exists. So what's going to happen? Who's going to represent National Forum for Human Rights when that group dies? You understand? Now it really doesn't exist. So these are all considerations that we had. But like I said at the start of this, this discussion, we live in a low trust environment. And so people want to treat this with suspicion. Some people just want to build political mileage out of this. But look, this is not something that government wants to get into a fight with interest groups on or with the public, right? I think based on the feedback, people think, even with its risks, when you are very specific, you reduce the suspicion. We will make sure that we honor that, so that this process works for the people. That is the essence of these discussions, because government is really not hiding anything. You understand? But yes, these are the considerations that we had when we went into the technical drafting. But then, if Parliament, and of course members of the public, think that yes, this should be more specific, we can work on that. But if I speak specifically about our brothers and sisters in the APC, we did this together. We designed this language together to not own it and say this is what we developed and lay it out to the public. That is what is not leadership.
Right. Let's look a bit at other key areas. The proportional representation. You mentioned that a recommendation from the Justice Cowan Constitutional Committee recommendations. But the problem the APC have, and rightly so, the Sierra Union, is the threshold. We saw what happened in the last election. The threshold, I think, was 11% or so. And this meant that smaller parties who were in parliament in 2018 didn't get the opportunity to come back in 2023. And the APC and other opposition parties are concerned that even in 1996, in 2002, the thresholds were lower. And that meant that we had other political parties who won seats in parliament. And they are calling that, yes, if we are going for proportional representation, let the threshold become lower. Will that be an agreement that this constitutional review or process or this amendment is willing to include, you know, to have a specific threshold so as not to go back to the drawing board whenever we have an election as to which threshold should we use?
That is a position that government shares 100%. Or that if we are going into this with the proportional representation system, we should reduce the threshold to make it possible for smaller parties to be represented, to make it possible for independent candidates to also be represented in parliament. And so that is why government, in drafting this, we have refused to propose a threshold, right? You propose a threshold, people treat it with suspicion. So we want parliament to prescribe this, of course, you know, in a separate law, including the type of PR. Because look, even in Sierra Leone, we have had variations of PR, right? In 96, we had what we like to call the wartime model, or you know, call it single block. Right? The entire country was a block, right? And the threshold was at 5%. And then in 2002, we did the district block with some variation, but then the threshold was actually 12% in 2002. And but then what the ECSL did was to allocate equal number of seats to the various districts. So each district was actually entitled to 8 seats, right? And then you work the percentage system. That percentage determines the number of representatives that will actually go to parliament for that particular district. And then, of course, in 2023 was like, you know, proportionate to the population size of that particular district. That is why you see that certain districts have more. And then, of course, we put the threshold at 11.9%. Of course, I would say that even in 2023, I was concerned as a citizen. I was concerned about the threshold. And so when we discussed this on the tripartite committee, even when ECSL came, the then chair of the ECSL, Mr. Kone, was very clear that having done this, the commission did recommend that if we move into elections using the PR system, then, you know, we should reduce the threshold to make it possible for smaller parties to participate or to be represented. And so that is why government has proposed, you know, as recommended by the Cowan Constitutional Review Committee, and to say that we do the PR system. Now, we acknowledge, we agree that that has also generated its own controversies because, of course, brothers and sisters on the APC side say, their preference will be first past the post. But I think there are certain things we need to put into context. We are tying our responses to 2023. We can acknowledge that the PR system had its challenges in 2023. Yes, I have gone to places in this country where constituents have expressed concerns that they don't feel like they had a say in who will represent them. Yes, I have gone around this country. I have spoken with people who say that even for the districts, their constituencies are not represented in parliament, right? So these are our concerns. And so that is why we say PR system, but then the specific type of PR, including the method of nomination and election, including threshold, to be prescribed by law. And that's not something that will live in the hands of parliament. That's a discussion that we should all really engage in and come up with a system, a PR system that will work for Sierra Leone, that will ensure that there's inclusivity, that will ensure that there's representation, and people feel like they're represented, that will ensure that there's accountability. It might be that we say, all right, even to get on the list, nominations should be done through open primaries at the constituency level. So,
since we haven't done all these, why not shelve the PR system for now and go with the constituency voting that we know, that we've worked with in 2007 and until 2018, that we can say we have a firm hold on, and we've practiced it for a longer period of time when we are not constrained by civil war, or as we had concerns in 2023. We know the constituency system can work. If we have concerns with regard to the PR system, the threshold, the consultation, why not put it aside for now and look at what we can handle?
We also know that the PR system will work. Matter of fact, majority of the world's democracies practice some form of PR. Majority. So first past the post that we practice now, we are actually in the minority of countries that practice first past the post. The data also shows that in majority of the countries in which people say they are satisfied with their electoral and governance systems, those countries practice PR. All of those issues informed the current constitutional review process, as well as the consultations across this country when the committee recommended that this country transitions to PR. And take note that yes, we had done PR in '96, we had done PR in 2002. And then we transitioned to first past the post in 2007 and then 2012. And then we set up the Cowan process in 2013 after we had tried first past the post twice. And then the Cowan process held consultations across this country from 2013 to 2017 after we had tried first past the post twice, and came back and said, this country, for our systems to work, the PR system is better suited for us. Now, we need to have a discussion on how we make that system work. But here's what I will say. And I'll ask that you even allow me to say this in Creole.
Yes, go ahead.
You get two issues, right? Almost you get same subject, two windows. We all sit on our soul at a time where everybody in heart cold. We discuss all the options, all the way to don't practice. And we say, make we go this way, make we do one. And then later, we get into a fight, or we get into an argument at a time where we had one. They will say, no, now this will for do. Which one really? Now more reason this decision will make. What to do? I will take who had coal over the time we had one. So the time when we all had coal in this country, after 2012, we get broad discussions in this country. The recommendations say, make we go PR. And then we can now, we say, yes, Kuskas take place, between two sets of people or certain other people in the same space here, so, and in the moment of that one match day, we say no, we will not take that system, now this system will take. Which one really more reasonable? So we, as government, since this don't happen at the time we had coal, and then at the time we had one, government believes say a reasoned position for take on this. Now the decision will all be taken at the time we had coal. And take note, say when the current committee they recommend PR, all the people embrace them. All the political parties agree say more go PR. I like to say the women's groups, when they get together in this country and put together what became known as the Women's Manifesto, 16 recommendations in the Cowan report, we then recommend say government for take on board. One of those recommendations, now we then say to ensure peace and cohesion in this country, the PR system should be entrenched in the constitution. That now within the have been said and hard cool. So that's what we want to go with. So I think now let's come and have a discussion on what type of PR will work for this country, because there are variations. So let's have a discussion. Do we want the open list PR? Do we want a PR system in which we say constituents determine who gets on the list through open primaries? The open list system will be where constituents actually see the names instead of just the parties, and then select the persons that they want to represent them. Is that what we should do? To ensure that constituencies remain represented, should we say, yes, there's broad representation across constituencies, but then the sub should be at the constituency level. So, in some sense, if we say constituency 110, you have Alpha Sesay as candidate, let the sub for that constituency be Joseph Kamara. So that way, if anything happens to Alpha Sesay, you're not taken from another list, you're taken from that constituency. So Joseph Kamara replaces Alpha Sesay. Is that a system that we should have? These are the discussions that we want to have, and then that will inform the system that we really go with.
You know, it sounds beautiful, but I'm glad the way you don't camp and creep, because a lot of people want to understand this. You know, it's very crucial. For the longest time, a lot of people don't say they're not the part of this process actually, you know. Many people, if you talk to man in a street, na PZ, go Abacha Street, right down to Salad Gronianda. People will tell you, say, first of all, they're not even sabi waiting PR mean. They're not even sabi waiting first past the post mean. Education not even they better, but the system we would use. And to be honest with you, now the people ain't really matter now. So people ain't feel say no more. Now on our two no more, what they say tattoo and yawa, APC and SPP now when they argue right now. So if I that selfishly, even when our two don't go sit down on side, don't even agree on them here, and the people ain't voice not dead. That's what Bokuman say.
So I'll say certain things. You know, I'm glad we raised that point. The first of all, let's say it is a responsibility of government for make sure say we take education out, information out to the people. In fact, my brother, the Minister of Information and Civic Education, likes to correct me that on an important matter like this, you know, we didn't call it public information, just providing information to its education, right? You know, making sure that people understand, they take part, they inform the process, you know, and then we own it together, right? So it is on us, and government is going to do that. But of course, we know that, you know, government cannot do it alone. So that is why we're grateful that, you know, you guys provide platforms like this where we come and discuss and lay these things out. Now, of course, you know, there are certain things that I've said here. For someone who has not watched AYV today, they might not know. And then 2 months down the road, they're going to say, you know, when they talk about that kind of thing, because they're not be here. So it's fine. But it is on us to devise different kinds of mechanisms for information dissemination and for public education. It is on us to get to these communities and make sure that we're engaging and really make sure that people don't only hear, but they provide feedback. They let us know what is important for them, how this system will work for them. It is on us to do that. And I bet you we will do it. We've done some of it. I just mentioned that the Common Committee undertook more than 10,000 public consultations between 2013 and 2017. It had more than 20,000 hours of airtime. Of course, as I mentioned as well, 40,960 website visits. Now, that was at a time when internet penetration was even low. So now, you know, we even need to do more. We need to up the ante. It is on us to do that. But also, let me note that for the tripartite process, the government's representatives and the APC did not only sit in one room at Buffets Hotel to do this. We traveled across the country. I was part of that team. We traveled across the country and held public consultations on the process, obtained feedback from various people. And those engagements also informed. If one reads the report, you will see that there's reference to these public engagements and how people expressed views or concerns about certain things within our electoral architecture. And those are the responses, those engagements have informed what is in this bill. Of course, you know, I like to acknowledge that a bill like this is never really going to capture what everyone says. It's never really going to capture. But of course, it is on government to be able to capture the majority view on an issue like this, and then make sure that it is reflected in the policies that we develop and the laws that we enact in this country. Now, when we take this process through Parliament, it's not the end of it. Whatever comes out of Parliament, we will have a robust public information and public education program so that there's public understanding and support, and that there's public ownership of this entire process.
You know, a while ago, on Sunday, in fact, I hosted Reverend James La, I'm sure you know him, National Coordinator New. And from what he told me is that most of the places, because he followed the regional consultations, that most of the places you went to, people didn't actually prefer this PR, which was, I mean, eventually typed in this amendment bill. That most of the places, people were clamoring for the FTTP, first past the post. He said it. In fact, they had earlier voted as civil societies, and majority of the vote, I think it was 60 or 70%, was first past the post. None of them voted for the proportional representation. The same for paramount chiefs, he said here on Sunday. How did you arrive now at this particular, you know, system?
I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, I like Reverend James Lai a lot. You know, he knows that on certain things we have disagreements. We always laugh about our disagreements. I think Reverend James Lahai's views on this, respectfully, were informed by the position that he took even before following these consultations. I know that firsthand. Right? And so, as someone who has been part of civil society before I transitioned into government, I like to say to my civil society friends that in fact joining government, I've extended our work into government. And so I still wear the civil society hat sometimes. So as someone who has been part of civil society and with tremendous respect for civil society, I'm not going to sit here and discredit civil society or civil society processes. I'll state my disagreements. I'll state my views. I am not going to discredit the process because I know that this country needs civil society. Government needs civil society. Opposition needs civil society. The public needs civil society. And I know that whilst in government, at some point I'm going to be out of government. And I'm going to need civil society. I'm going to be there in that space again. So I'd just like to lay that out. But I also know as someone who has been part of this process, or someone who has been in civil society for almost my entire career, I've never really seen processes where civil society has to get to a vote. That's not how civil society functions. We don't vote.
You think they were wrong?
These issues.
They were wrong to do it.
I'm not saying.
Okay.
I don't even know whether they voted. I was not there. The first time I heard that civil society voted was not from Reverend James Lai.
Okay.
Was not from members of NEW. I heard that from the APC. that civil society had voted. So I don't know how APC got that information, and then as government, noting that my office was managing this process, I didn't get to know about it. Matter of fact, the event that you reference, I attended that event. I delivered the keynote. I got there, and my brother, Honorable Abdul Kago, made his statement just before me. One of the first complaints he made was that NEW had put together an unbalanced team of experts, that NEW had brought in experts who had all come in there and spoken in favor of PR over first past the post. So when you say that people voted, first, in my presence, the Honorable accused NEW of bringing in experts who were all in support of PR. And that process was born out of a recommendation made by the tripartite committee of that on the preferred electoral system, we should have a national dialogue. It said national dialogue. So we were ready for the national dialogue. But then we sat back and as government and said, if you do just a national dialogue, you're not going to capture the views of a significant percentage of this country. So we recommended that before the national dialogue, let's do regional consultations. So that is when civil society, with support from the same partners, well, let me say NEW, with support from the same partners, said you'll get civil society perspective or news perspective. So that's the event that I attended. But then, before we got into the event and after the event, the understanding was that after that consultative meeting, the outcome of that exercise will be submitted to me as Attorney General, because my office was leading this process.
Okay.
I had a team in my office that was managing this, right? But as I speak to you, this process that Reverend James Lai talks about, as I speak to you this moment, 9:15 a.m., 4th of February 2026, I have never received or seen that report for a process that I'm managing. And there was an understanding that after the report, actually we discussed this, that after the report, we will, that the organizers, after the event, the organizers of that event will submit their report to me. That did not happen. To this day, I have spoken about it publicly multiple times. I have not seen the report. I don't know how those numbers were arrived at. I don't know, because I left after my statement, right? I don't know the number of civil society representatives who were in that room. Okay. I don't know how the voting took place. I have not seen the report, so it's hard to speak to it. But then, for the regional consultations, and look, Reverend Lai and I have spoken about this, so I'll say this publicly. Yes, Reverend Lai followed the process. But everywhere Reverend Lai went, he grabbed the mic and tried to influence the discussion. At some point, we had to step in to say, no, you've had consultations in Freetown. We're waiting to get your report. You've already gone on liberty to say, this is the outcome. You've done your part. Just bring the report. Don't haunt the process. But that is what happened. So if Reverend has said that is what the majority said, I don't know. What I can speak to is that as part of this recommendation to have a national dialogue, and then of course the recommendation that we get regional consultations, what we did was that we got our partners, International Ideas, with support from EU, to hire 3 facilitators. 1, Valnora Edwin, respected civil society. 2, Jope Magui, respected elections expert. These 2 persons are respected across the region. And then 3, an external elections expert that we did not hire, who was hired by International Ideas from Nigeria. They came, it was my first time meeting him, and then they managed the consultations. And then they produced a report. That report was submitted to me as Attorney General. When I received it, I went through it, I shared the report with various people in the APC.
And that report favored the PR system?
So here's what the report says. The report itself does not choose one system over the other. The report basically states that certain people said they prefer the first past the post system and gave their reasons. Certain people prefer the PR system and gave their reasons. And then, of course, they added, going back to your point, that if we must employ the PR system, we should have a reduced threshold. Said some other people preferred the hybrid system, a blend of two, which is applicable in some other countries. I received the report, shared it with the president, the chief minister, who has overall supervision over this process. And then I shared it with other stakeholders, including our brothers and sisters in the APC. So now you have a recommendation from the tripartite committee that you get a national dialogue. Now the national dialogue comes back and says, this is the report, these are the views of people, but it doesn't say in what percentage. But then you have a system that was informed by years of consultations, by years of expert engagements, by years of investment by government, by years of commitment by government, because since the war came to an end, every government has made a commitment that will take this process to completion. Years of commitment. And then first white paper authored by the APC at the time when my senior brother, Joseph Kamara, was Attorney General. Second white paper under the SLPP in 2021. All of these processes informed that decision. So take note that the tripartite process was never meant to undo existing reform commitments. It was meant to complement this commitment. So if tripartite did not recommend this, and then the current process, after all of those engagements that I said, recommended this system, what is government supposed to do? Government is going to take that which it had taken a policy position approved by cabinet, that which has been informed by expert engagement, that which has been informed by broad consultations across this country at a time when, as I said earlier, where we had coal. That is what government is going to do. Now, of course, it's before Parliament. So when our brothers and sisters in the APC say we will resist this bill, I don't think resist is the right word. Just say we will not support it. Just say we'll vote against it. But I think at the end of the day, we're going to find common ground. That is the essence of these discussions that we're having. And we will find common ground because we all agree that we need a system that will work for the people of this country.
The reason why a lot of people are fearful of this is because, the past events have influenced the future. We all saw when, they were voting for Lara Telopias's, removal in Parliament, and the spectacle unfolded in front of our eyes. Now there is a discordiality in Parliament. The argument is, some are saying that 2/3 majority means those who are present at the time when the votes are being cast. Others are saying, no, 2/3 majority means the entirety of Parliament. So there is even ambiguity and confusion within this very bill, and how it's going to be voted for.
On the voting process that would determine
that ambiguity or confusion is with the current 1991 Constitution. That is what you're explaining. So maybe all of these things are,
Why not consider all of these things before amending? Because I know that the TRC recommendation, one of the things that it was very big on was quelling down the power of the executive.
Of course.
None of that happened here.
No, and it does that. So the point is that if someone tells you that this increases the power of the executive, that person is wrong. That person has not read this properly. Because one...
But I've read it all.
Let me learn on this. One, the current Constitution it grants power to the president to appoint the chair of the Electoral Commission or other commissioners in consultation with leaders of registered political parties. Right? The Constitution doesn't even define what consultation means. It doesn't even say, if I just inform you whether I've consulted you, whether I even need feedback from you. It doesn't say. It just says consultation. Now, this bill says reduce that power and put it in the hands of such a nominating committee. Now, I just went through several examples of how we have drafted laws in this country on such committees. But then, of course, if people think we need to do better to strengthen it, we're happy to strengthen it within this bill. But then, that actually reduces, it takes existing powers from the presidency and puts these powers in the hands of such a nomination committee that will make recommendations to the president. That is not increasing the power of the executive. I'll tell you another thing.
Okay.
I told you earlier, now this bill says we should have a fixed date for elections.
Yes.
Under the current constitution, the president sets the date for elections. Last time, we were stuck with a situation wherein one president kept us waiting for 1 year, right? But now, this bill says take that power away and then put it in the ground norm, the supreme law of the state, that on this date every 5 years, elections will happen. That is not strengthening the hand of the executive. I'm still looking for examples.
I know, but again, another thing, as I said, JFK yesterday and even Banjo Tijansi mentioned ambiguity in this law. I mean, why not state it explicitly clear?
Even before going forward.
Even before going forward.
Because there are concerns now. And
you know,
even if those concerns are not from the APC, there are genuine concerns that even before this bill is going to be passed, let's deal with the ambiguity. Let's expressly state those things that we don't agree on now, so as to avoid interpretation issues tomorrow.
I agree
like,
with
for
you.
example, how are they going to vote? For example, what is 2/3, and what's the constitution? The arithmetic in makeup of the 2/3.
I agree with you completely.
As the drafter AG, why not include it first before bringing it to Parliament?
Which specific one?
Those
for example, spelling out how they are going to vote, 2/3 majority. Is it the entire Parliament, or just those who will be there at the time when they are voting?
A question of how they're going to vote is not in this bill.
Yeah,
it is already in section 108 of the Constitution.
Okay.
And I think section 108 is very clear. It says 2/3 of members of Parliament, not members in Parliament. I think I don't even know why people misread that. It's 2/3 of members of Parliament. Now,
meaning what? For the layman to understand.
2/3 of the totality
of Parliament. Okay.
That is what it says. I think if people have concerns or questions about section 108, the Constitution is very clear. When there are questions on interpretation of our Constitution, we can take this to the Supreme Court.
Okay.
I think we've done that in the past. So I think, it's something that we should do. But the reading of it is that it's 2/3 of members of Parliament. Now, you mentioned the removal of the former Auditor General. In that, about 8 APC MPs had to vote for the removal. Now, the point is that, take note, no one party has a 2/3 majority in Parliament.
As it stands.
So this bill, SLPP cannot pass this bill on its own.
Without APC.
Without APC support.
You cannot pass.
And APC cannot refuse outrightly without an SLPP crossover or support.
Well, if it's for a statutory instrument, that is when, say, if you add anything or reject it, then you need to mobilize the 2/3 support. But for a bill like this, what is really required is a vote of 2/3 to take this forward. Now, take note that even for the SLPP, right, it's not a given that every SLPP member of Parliament is going to support this bill. Because we've had situations, look, we all follow the discussions around the Child Rights Bill, right, which is now the Child Rights Act. Right, there's a particular provision
The FGM.
Exactly, the FGM clause, government came with that, or that, anyone being subjected to that should be at an age of consent. So below 18, incapable of giving that consent. Members of Parliament, including the SLPP members, rejected that proposal from government. That tells you it's not every time that Parliament is rubber stamp. If you take one reason why we still haven't enacted the Safe Motherhood Bill, it's because MPs from both sides disagree. So I know that even for SLPP, it is not a given. But the point is that even if all SLPP members vote for this bill, you're still going to need members of the APC to vote for it. And I really think that when we have all of these discussions, and it goes back to your question, why not do all of these?
Those concerns,
because no bill that goes to Parliament is perfect. Right? Bills that go to Parliament benefit a lot from public feedback, and then those will inform the final outcome. Right? Of course, provisions will be subject to different interpretations, and that is why it is on us to be as clear as we can possibly be, and that is what we are going to do with this particular bill.
We're about to read some of the messages on Facebook. Before we do, I mean, a while ago, the Chief Minister was here being interviewed by Mattia, and he said quite clearly here on this very sofa you're seated now that the government didn't have money actually to fund a referendum in this country. But there are entrenched clauses in some of these things you are trying to amend. Is this process being rushed?
So first, well, a process that has gone on for more than 20 years cannot be rushed.
But you unpicked certain areas of it.
Well,
why not do the entirety of the law?
So that is also because, as I said earlier, we had a clear understanding with various stakeholders that, one, because elections are time sensitive, you get elections proposals through now instead of waiting for later. But also, I've said publicly that we are undertaking these reforms at a time when we are reforming our broader electoral architecture. And I've said that like a train track, right? The two processes should be aligned, right? And so the ECSL, for example, has been subjected to functional management review. Now, all of these reforms in the institutions, in the various laws that establish these institutions, which are meant to strengthen our electoral architecture, they are anchored on this. So now, the longer this waits, the more delays we have in the broader reform process. And so, look, some people have said, put this process on hold, don't do it, including people in the APC who set up the Cowan process, and then we are part of the tripartite process, now who do not want to own this process, saying it is rushed. Now, if this waits, what this means, it's one thing. The investments that we made following the 2023 elections, all of those will be moot. It basically means we go into 2028 just the way we went into 2023. So if people say that there were issues to be fixed ahead of 2023, then we're not fixing those issues ahead of 2028. That is why it's not about urgency. It's about doing what is right so that it works for the people of this country. Look, for government, we can take the easy route and say, just leave it. I'll answer your question on the referendum, so it doesn't appear as though I am deliberately avoiding it. So first, I did not listen to the Chief Minister's interview. I did not see videos of it. But of course, you probably interviewed him, and so you'll have a better recollection of that. I think there are certain practical things that government has to consider. One is we have elections in 2028. When is a good time to go into referendum? Right? A referendum is like an election. You have to update the voter register, deploy logistics, recruit election staff, deploy them across the country, and you get a referendum. So that is on the table. But also, government has also put on the table the possibility that instead of spending money on two processes, are we better off getting these non-entrenched provisions now? And then noting that there are more than 20 entrenched provisions that are impacted in the broader reform package, including those provisions that will strengthen human rights. Right? So in that broader reform package, do you go into a referendum with multiple questions, or do you go into a referendum with a single question on whether we want a new constitution, which is really what the appetite, is. So now the point is, for us, we say, do you do that referendum now, or do we take this as a single question into the 2028 election? So we're having, as other countries have done, so we're having a referendum at the same time that we're having an election. So these are all options that are on the table.
Okay.
But what we will do as government is to engage with various stakeholders. So at the end of the day, we all take a decision on what is most practical for this country.
There are messages, a lot of them actually, on our Facebook page. I will start with Mistake from Duzag. So as a nation, we need a deep consultation and broad public dialogue within our political space, especially on matters such as constitutional amendments. Such a process must reflect the views of the ordinary citizen and not serve the interest of any single faction. Many Sierra Leoneans have mixed feelings about the proportional representation system, as they believe it limits their direct connection to political representatives. As a result, many prefer the first-past-the-post system of government, which they feel allow for greater accountability and easy access to elected officials.
And Lambo Richie says every electoral era our country loses a lot of resources to put in recommendations that only last 4, 5 or 10 years. So sad.
Suma Abdullah is saying the tripartite agreement is a biased and selfish settlement between SLPP and APC, not for the majority.
And Hoka Sori Kome is saying the constitutional review of Sierra Leone should be within the attenuation of the people's interest.
The constitutional review of Sierra Leone should be within the annotation of the people's interest. Okay, you've read that. But you have the support. That's obscene. Mr. AG, how much effort are you guys going to scan with non-political optical access into Chapter 5 and Chapter 2 of the rule book of contention? He's asking. I don't know what it means. Perhaps you would answer that.
Yakuba Kedi Mansare, Jakuba Janel, and Socialist Tula all agree. They're in agreement. Yakuba says, I support the PR system. It's an advantage to the state because physically and financially we save more funds and no fight or death in our communities due to electoral violence. Jakuba Janel says, I would prefer an open PR system where constituents participate in identifying their candidates to represent them in parliament. And Socialist Tula says PR is very good and economical for the state.
Aloysius Y is saying it's a yes for the PR system that will give relevance to constituencies where a primary takes place to choose their candidates and submit to the parties, so the people will know who represents them and have a say in the representative governance. Simple. Mr. AG, we the people of this country for now, we don't need PR system, please. Hamdi Mustafa Sahid.
Tunde Scott says, we say no to the reduction of the 55% threshold and no way to PR system extension to the presidency. One man, one vote.
Saidu Lahid Mansare, Mr. AG is telling us the good side of this constitutional amendment, but the main opposition party are saying it's not good for the people of Sierra Leone. Is this not a clear evidence that you people are doing it in your own interest and not for the people of Sierra Leone?
And Alucious Y says, the country's legal brain box is speaking to the nation. Thanks for the reforms and the bold steps taken at your ministry.
Aisha Dalton is saying when the president appoints the search committee, he gives them order of who he wants them to choose as electoral commissioner. It's that simple.
And Aisha Dalton is saying the bad laws and amendments are not being interpreted by the AG because they are buried deep inside this proposal. Dishonesty and gerrymandering at work.
I think these are some of the messages I can see. I'm not sure. Do you have more?
Yes. One says, when the president appoints the search committee, he gives them order on who he wants them to choose as electoral commissioner. It's that simple.
Sesay.
Well, thank you. Really all interesting comments. I think it's a mixed bag, right? But I think they are all very kind comments. You know, it also points to the level of engagement that this process has generated. Of course, you know, I started with the last comment on the search committee. Look, this will not be the first time that we are making appointments or we are constituting committees to govern or manage certain processes. I just went through various pieces of legislation. We really do not have evidence. We should be informed by the data. We do not have evidence that in all of these committees, in a lot of these committees, they have acted only on the directives of the president. And like I said earlier, we also note people's concerns that we should be more clear. We will be, we will be. That I give my word on. Like I said, we were informed by the recommendation in the tripartite committee report, which I read earlier, and then how we have drafted other laws in this country. Should we do better as a country, as a government? Yes, we should, and we will. So that's it. Someone mentioned chapter 2 and chapter 5. Chapter 2 is actually the fundamental principles of state policy, and chapter 5 has to do with executive authority. Yes, chapter 2, there's been a lot of discussions on whether you make the rights in chapter 2 justiciable. Because if you look at chapter 2, it talks about, the economic, social, educational objectives of the state. Talks about, the state's obligations or duty to provide basic education, as well as, health and other things. But then, when you get to section 14 of chapter 2, it says these rights are not justiciable. So of course, at the global level, there are civil and political rights, and there are economic, socio-economic rights, economic and social rights, and cultural rights. In a lot of countries, yes, civil and political rights, mandatory. Socio-economic rights, it's really based on availability of resources. There's also an ideological divide, between the West and, other parts of the world on this. So, but what we are trying to do is to say those rights that are in chapter 2, like health and education, which already government accepts that it has a responsibility to provide free basic education for the people of this country. We want that to remain an obligation of government. Same with health, right? To certain constituents in our country, doesn't mean that, government has to make it like, free for everybody. Government has to provide the enabling environment. Government has to provide the resources, you understand, so that you and I are able to access healthcare, even if we have to pay the bare minimum for it. That's an obligation. And so that is why we'll go with the Cowan recommendation that chapter 3 of the Constitution, which has to do with human rights, be renamed the Bill of Rights. And if we name it the Bill of Rights, it's broader. And so the idea will be take some of those rights laid out in chapter 2, and then we bring them to chapter 3. So we'll do that. Same with chapter 5, where there have been a lot of questions about executive authority. I mentioned, gave you 2 examples of where we've tried to reduce that, but also I know you guys discussed this yesterday, the sacking of the vice president, once expelled from their political party, and then what happened? That also informed the recommendation of the Cowan committee that loss of membership should not automatically mean that someone ceases to qualify to become president or vice president, because as it is, that is what the president did. So we're trying to take those powers away from the president. That's actually reducing supreme executive authority to make sure that if someone is expelled from their party, the provisions in section 51 of our constitution, which lay out how you can remove a president and vice president, that is what will apply. Some people have said, we're giving parliament the powers to remove a president or vice president. Parliament already has those powers under section 51, right? The procedure laid out in section 51. Parliament already has those powers. We're only saying that this, which was excluded from that parliamentary oversight, be now included in parliamentary oversight. So if someone loses their membership in a political party, they will become subjected to that provision in section 65. That is also reducing executive authority. So yes, like I said earlier on, people have questions. These are genuine concerns, and it's on us as government to make sure that we address these concerns, not only that we are providing clarifications to these issues, but also to ensure that people's concerns are reflected in the laws that we enact, including the Constitution that we want to take to completion.
All right, and thank you very much, Alpha Sesay, for joining us this morning. And once again, from us, the presenters, the management staff of AYV, we want to wish you a happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
And thank you for spending over an hour.
Indeed, I know it's difficult, on your birthday, you are here, sweating, defending your work. It's tough,
and someone
it's a tough business.
It's really tough to defend.
It's tough, But we wish you well.
Thank you.
You know, and we pray. You know, I can always say this. Now, one salon this, a small place. You know, we've traveled quite a lot, and we don't go to bigger places. We don't see how they run the country. The list of the things that we go need now, and for them now. So because we be there through the war, we see how they damage, how people die. You know, but come out, we don't understand, we don't see or smell which side they be born or they be shooting, cut people, and they don't go understand. You know, so we always pray, let better come. You know, and we pray that una we did before we do their work there, God will continue for guide una. And let will get better laws than the country. Like he always says, Salona, the capital city of beautiful laws. But again, as you know, implementation is a big problem because when politics coincide, they either misinterpret or interpret something for fit their own purposes. But God did.
God did for you.
God did indeed. All right, thank you so much, Mr. Minister AG, for coming this morning. And I know that most of you, we don't watch with our crew, they talk with Mixon. And I don't understand, but putting them way, I feel say be ambiguous, right? When I read from the AG this morning, you don't explain everything in its entirety, and that they work in the parliament today now. And again, for do wider consultations again, not to say they done. No, this is not just a draft, you understand? It's possible to say then go back to the drawing board where parliament don't make adjustments and all of that, so we'll get a better election come 2028. But this concludes this session of the program. We shall be back in a jiffy with the second segment. Stay tuned.